welcome back to another episode of Chrysalis Satori. Today, we're going to talk about a little bit of a continuation of what we did in the last episode, but it's more the escapist solution. Like some people have talked to us in the past, they mentioned that just leaving the country is not the cure, and we agree with that. But it does give you a good perspective of seeing the rat maze for what it is, or the matrix for what it is, whatever word you like to use for that. So there's two parts of this, kind of like one, what are the options in the world that you can escape to, and two, is it a healthy solution for dealing with these burnout issues? So welcome, as always, to my wonderful friend, Mr. West. How are you doing today, sir?
Morning, Paul.
Morning to you too, my friend. It's always great to see you. So, in your mind, how would you define escapism, and what does that mean to you when somebody says we are escapists?
Well, and again, this is all opinion, right? So these are all just more talking points. I don't have as many excerpts from my readings concerning this. And I want to separate when I say it as well. So I think travel, exploring new ways of life, new worlds, I think that's absolutely essential, beneficial for a multitude of reasons. And this doesn't have to apply to burnout, pre-burnout, post-burnout. I think it's something, if you had the opportunity, especially when you're young, to absolutely see the other ways of living, infrastructures, cultures, all that. I think there's all sorts of benefits to that. But to your point, for this episode, there is a point where, I mean, travel and journey and exploration of the self are all healthy. That's not necessarily escapism. Escapism is more of when you're using something that, like a lot of things, maybe it's good for a treatment. I do think escapism is probably part of most everyone's self journey during or post burnout. But it, like all it should be temporary. And again, this is all opinion, conjuncture, right? I feel like that should be a temporary process. It shouldn't become a way of life. But that, everybody, if you have the capability, I mean, we know people that do it. For myself, just like when I had started using cannabis, I went into it with the mindset of temporary and as treatment and as medicine. I came into the idea of being abroad as temporary as well, although it has turned in from 1 year to many. But I am reinserting myself into the matrix here soon. And so I would say the difference is, part of that is, so I went into it with intention, right? I went into it for self-discovery, trying on a new pair of shoes in a lot of different places, right?
Yeah.
Seeing what fit, what didn't fit. And so I've learned those things. So I've had my experiments. I've determined, this and that about different countries, not even countries, the cultures really is the point. What works for me, what doesn't. And some of it's also not culture so much. Like for me here, it goes from, in America, I always either lived in rural or suburbs. I've never lived heavily in a city, even in the times I did live in cities or suburbs of cities, but even in the cities, they were not overly populated like here. This is a very overpopulated city, so it's a very different experience. So I have not lived something previously so extensively urban, and I've learned that about myself. It doesn't work for me. So I've tried that pair of shoes on, and it just doesn't fit for me. But so I went into it with the intention of learning about things. I've accomplished that. So I'm not going back in to my home country the way I was. Kind of what was in a previous episode. We said that only Neo could see the Matrix while in the Matrix. But I think that's just it. I think, if anything, I'm going back in with different understanding perspectives and understanding the system that I'm going back into better, what I can do with it, its limitations, how I can manage my own personal goals and still accomplish things in a very finite-minded and finite-structured system that only rewards immediate wins. It only acknowledges short-term goals, which is where we were before we were burnout. We accomplish short-term goals, and you accomplish it. And it's like, okay, so what do you do after you've won? Now what? Right after you, and it gets then it becomes redundant and repetitive and so on. And but I'm going back in with different understandings. So my approach I didn't even necessarily look at what I was doing as escapism necessarily at the time that I was doing it. But
Hmm.
my opinion of it, my feeling of it, it should be something that's a treatment. I don't think as a lifestyle or become, I don't consider that myself probably a healthy choice, at least for me, to live that way indefinitely, because you really can't escape. I mean, the things that we talk about, the structures of the first world,
Yeah.
will travel, follow, and saturate. You know, you've always heard previous countries that America fast food has gotten its grip on it, and where they used to be healthy, now they have an obesity crisis.
It's yeah.
I mean, that's just one example, but we're also talking about all the finite mindsets and the consumer driven opinions, consumer, attitudes, the nouveau riche attraction to brands and wearing certain things, and how that affects cultures and it changes them. Just like
The
how
more
smartphones have changed,
yeah.
cultures, having that prevalence and that ubiquitous availability, and what it's doing to the youth and that sort of thing. So I don't think you can escape it anyway. So
Yeah.
I don't. That's probably one of the reasons I don't. You
You could
can't
just delay
outrun
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can delay it. You can
That,
put it off. You can keep moving around where
that's pretty
places are
much
less
it.
affected, but I don't think you can escape it entirely forever.
Yeah.
So I don't. That's why I don't myself think it's probably the best route.
Right. It does give you perspective on the world. Like escapism allowed me at least um, to see the rat maze, like we talked about in the previous episode. Like it got me out and it lifted that weight off, and then I know that it's not a long term cure. Now some people do take it as that. Like we've had several friends that have moved to Thailand, Vietnam, different places in the world, and each one has its own little benefit as far as like
I have
uh,
some in Mexico and Central America. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like people tend to find a world or a culture, and they quickly adapt to it, and then that's their little place, and that's fine. One of our friends is just building a house in Thailand, and we more power to them. Now we don't know much about the Thailand economy. Can they just come take the property from him? We have no idea, but that was his life choice. Now he's an older gentleman, so maybe it might be forever for him, which would be wonderful. But I do agree with you. I think escapism is the first step in curing the burnout, but it's not the long term solution. Learning how to deal with these things mentally is the solution. Like as far as like what you're doing, you're reinserting yourself back into the matrix, but you're coming in with a whole different level of understanding, and I think that's super important.
I think it's good to. I don't even know if I'd say I'd prescribe it as part of the burnout. I think it coincidentally just it almost always happens to people. You've got to get out of everything that you know and you're in, because that's what you feel saturated, overwhelmed,
Hmm.
and burdened by. Usually, um, talking to a lot of other people that go through burnout at different stages for different reasons, but usually that's just a common feeling symptom, and they just have to get out of it. Just sudden. That this is where you hear people that just they have kids or family, what, and then they just they're
Uh,
gone for a year, 3 years, and they
yeah,
just disappear for a while. You just need a place to exhale, catch your breath, reset, rebound. I mean, that's just it. So do you keep running, or do you actually reset and rebalance? Do you do the work, the self discovery, the growth, and the new understanding, so that you can, as I put it for myself, got back on my feet,
yeah,
rather than just continuing to evade what's waiting on you, maybe back where you originated. So
yeah.
I,
It's like that old
I don't even know if
saying.
it's necessary, but it's certainly very common with burnout that you
Very
need to, very typical.
yeah, and I don't think it's. I think it's a. I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd prescribe it. Like if you have a pretty good
Right.
life, then I would say. But if you reach a point to where your mental well being is seriously being challenged, like I know when I landed here, within the first week, that weight was lifted off my shoulders. I felt so different, and it felt great. But I knew it couldn't be forever, because the old saying is, "Wherever you go, there you are." Because the truth of the matter is, like the problem is not your environment. The problem is inside of you.
It's you. It's
so
you. Everything's self growth and self. Yeah.
so if you're not learning how to deal with these things, but what it can do is buy you the time to figure these things out, and maybe give you a reprieve, or
Hmm.
a little bit of relaxation, and it allows you to kind of take a step back and see that the world is different. The places you're in is completely different. So you have an excitement and exhilaration of learning a new place for the first time, and it frees you from the normal responsibility of the U.S. for a moment. Not forever, but there's different places in the world to go to too. So we talk to a lot of expats, and everyone's got its different little vibe or feeling. Of course,
For most people, this was like me. It wasn't the first destination. It was just one of them, and they're on their path to many. And yeah,
there was a lot of people that came, like Vietnam during the COVID, went to, deported everybody. They basically said everybody out. And so they had a ton of people come here from Vietnam. We've met a few of them. We had dinner with a friend of ours that lived in Vietnam for a while last night. So he was telling us about, the culture there and how it's different from Albania and how it's different from most of Europe in general. All this, like the segments of the world, I would say there's Southeast Asia, there's European culture, and then there's kind of Latin America, Central America culture, and all of these are kind of escapist destinations like Costa Rica. God, there's so many. I mean, like all over the world, basically. But
generally compared to your originating nation, a less expensive location.
They're-
That's the attribute that you need to get away from everything comfortably for a little while,
yeah,
right?
they're far, far, far less expensive. I found now I did spend a lot of time in Belize and Central America, and I found it to be not quite as safe as here. That was one of the best things about Albania, that it was super duper duper safe here, which if you read online, most people say it's not. So they're dead wrong about that. Plus, most of the places, like I've been to Guatemala and a lot of Central America. Wes has spent some time in Mexico. Little things like leaving your telephone on a table, you can't do that
In front of you
there.
as you're eating.
Yeah.
As you're eating. It's just sitting there as you're sitting there with it.
Right.
It's not like you left it.
They'll run up and they'll grab your phone and run away, and you're good luck catching them. Like that kind of stuff just doesn't happen in Albania, and
Yeah, nothing like
that was actually a big relief because when I was worried about that here, like constantly having to be hyper vigilant like you are in the U.S. In a different place, but here is not like that 100%. From what I understand, Vietnam and Thailand aren't very much like that either. Now Thailand has a tendency, from what I've heard, to be a little more. They kind of pull on you all the time to buy something, give them money or maybe a massage, quote unquote. But I mean, it's that kind of harassment, like to get you to do business with them in one way, shape, or form. Now, that doesn't really happen that much in Albania. There's a few. You will have beggars and such that come by, but you can kind of just do the thing we said.
That's
before.
not service oriented.
That's not.
That's just a beggar.
Definitely not service oriented. Yeah. So it's a little different in that respect, and it's much more. It's a European feel. They want to be very European. They haven't quite reached the pinnacle of, I would say, like a maybe Italy, like Rome or something like that. But they're working on it. It's definitely an ascending nation. It's a nation in growth. They're just a little behind the time. I mean, the country is only 25 years old. I think it's very
Right. You're coming out of occupation very recently. So you have generational cultures that are still very heavy and very present of communistic era, and they've been occupied multiple times by multiple nations and over their entire history. So they've never really kind of been their own yet.
They're still finding their identity, and they're still finding how to work things properly. And there's some pushback to that, actually. I mean, even within, so the people here, they do protest the government a lot. So they're still trying to figure out a lot of things. And right now, the system's kind of benefiting the few at the top and not benefiting everybody. And they do push back on that. So
well, the expression is, that's the problem with business. I can't even call it business. It's the mindset is still very opaque, very heavy. Take what you can while you can, and that's a thieves mentality. That's not business,
right?
And that's the way it was in a much harsher time and environment. It was survival, so it's a little bit different. They haven't learned to plan and to look ahead. They don't understand customer service and the benefit of a customer and retain a customer and repeat business. It's just for the now. So all they ever care about is a one big win right now.
Right.
So they're not willing to invest in something that builds and grows as much. There's just,
Yeah,
Anyway,
the delayed gratification for sure is a problem with them. They still trying to figure that kind of stuff out, but they're coming along. They're getting better a little bit over time. But the people that tend to go to like the Philippines or Vietnam, most of them would be kind of, it's a bit cliche, but they're kind of looking for love, looking for a spouse or partner. They tend to go to those places. I mean, Thailand's more of a instant gratification place. I would think, from what I understand from Vietnam, is especially talking to the gentleman last night, he was saying that like it's more romantic. They're looking more for a husband, especially after
in Vietnam versus Thailand.
versus Thailand. Yeah, they
Yeah.
are. If they're over 27 or 28, I think in Vietnam they're considered an old maid, and they are, kind of shunned. So the Westerners that come in there, they find a lot of success and love, so to speak, from these people. Philippines is a little more. I would say it's very similar, maybe to like a mix between Vietnam and Thailand, maybe a little more Thailandish. But I've noticed like they're very just from just looking at videos and such online, they're a little more standoffish as far as you're the foreigner and you will never be accepted into their group. But you will always, it's a bragging point a little bit to be, oh, my daughters with a foreigner, because
But you'll always be the foreigner,
but
always.
you'll always be the foreigner, and you'll always be kind of a little bit of a
If you set up a business, had a family, all of that, had 30 years there making friends, you'll still always be the foreigner.
you'll always be the foreigner. Yeah, and I don't think as much as that exists in Albania as far as I mean, it's a little bit. I mean,
No, they absorb you.
yeah, but they definitely
They
take,
make you one of them.
yeah, they turn you into Albanian, and they're very proud of that fact. But yeah, it's definitely so the different parts of the world are going to give you different things. Tell me about your time in Mexico. What made you leave Mexico, or what made you go there? Number one, and what made you leave there? Number two.
Well, it wasn't on the original destination list. Mine, if you remember, my journey began during the pandemic. It's not when I planned it. I had set everything up, power of attorney. The house was set up for sale. Everything was done, and then we got quarantined and locked in. So, but we went over this in like the earlier episodes. So Mexico, to put it short, was just what was available at the time, while we were still waiting for Southeast Asia, which was a destination at the time. We were going to do Bali and do visa runs every 30 days to various countries, Singapore and so on, Thailand. Just like for a weekend trip, just for the visa stamp, right? But just ended up in Mexico didn't want to stay in the States, was hopping around different states at the time, but didn't want to stay in the U.S. Aruba opened up, did that for a month, and then again, just waiting for Asia to open, which they were the last to open. So ended up in Mexico with the intention of 6 months. It turned into 10. It was just availability. It wasn't a grand design or anything, but I did stay somewhere that I wanted in terms of diving and activities, Puerto Morelos. So it was good for those months. Mm-hmm. But like what you're talking is, so hygiene, safety being a big one. Yeah, Mexico wasn't just not my cup of tea. It didn't work for me. I mean, they have mini elections all year long, different counties or the equivalent counties, cities, and so on. Lots of elections, and every election, there's news of body parts somewhere or a shooting or, Yeah. And back then when I was doing it, and that wasn't that long ago, even though their violence was high, it was local on local. It was never tourist centered. I mean, maybe the thievery was, but the physical violence wasn't. Well, that changed just right as we left. That's when the first public shooting, and it was just some, cartels, some drug gangs with another drug gang, but it was on the beaches in the tourist sector in Cancun, which is not where we were, but we were below that. And, tourists caught in a crossfire. And then ever since then, it was almost like an unspoken rule. Like, you don't have the violence against the tourists. That's changed. I've heard a lot of, more ransoms, more kidnappings, more physical attacks, more caught in the crossfire. That's changed since I left just in time.
Wow.
But
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of, and like you, when I got here, I didn't know what to expect. Again, this was not a destination for me. It was just what was available. We went all over this in another
Yeah, yeah.
earlier episode, our backstories, but I noticed the safety factor huge here, huge. Just probably one of the safest places I've ever lived.
Yeah, I agree with that, and which is so different from what you hear as far as like the
That was
on the
different from everything that
on
I
the
read or was
internet.
prepared for.
Yeah,
Yes.
my mom was terrified when was moving here. Like it's literally the safest place I've ever been. So it's definitely different. So experiencing those places in the world, I think you have to make your own judgment. A lot of these time, a lot of these options. Like for years, like Costa Rica was a big escapist destination, and it's kind of gotten flooded now, and it's changed.
Well,
So
that's just it. That's what happens. That's why you can't outrun this. Like when we're talking about escapism, I don't think you can,
yeah,
because as soon as it pops up, it's only good when it's an unknown destination, which is almost an impossibility now because everyone is blogging and nomading and supporting
yeah,
their financial needs by, uploading their personal, well, their content and their travels, and it gives this exposure, and people begin flocking
hmm
to the destination. That changes the culture. It creates an inflation all of
yeah,
a sudden.
yeah.
A
Prices
lot of
just
standards.
rise.
It's not what it used to be anymore.
Hmm
That sort of thing. So yeah, Costa Rica was a huge was, but that was like 90s. That was a long time ago,
Yeah,
really, when it was.
yeah,
But it's still referred to. But it's it that happens in every place. So
yeah,
that's another reason why escapism doesn't really work.
yeah. But yeah, for sure, it's definitely. I mean, wherever you go, there you are. Is I think perfect, like a perfect explanation for that. As much as that doesn't make any sense, but like it's you have to figure this out within yourself. Like, and you, I mean, escape to take a breath and to get some time and maybe a cheaper lifestyle to
Give yourself a
figure
year
things out. But
to
don't,
exhale, but then you've got to like figure out what I have to do within myself to not need to keep running or staying.
yeah,
You got to do the self work and reading and lessons and so on. Yeah.
yeah. So do that. I mean, when you do have that time, take the time to study, to read, to understand these things because we're never taught these things. So it's on you to pick them up and learn them. So I think if you do escape and you do decide to go to another country, you'll have great exposure. It'll be a good way to extract yourself from the hamster wheel, but don't slack on that time because I truly thought if I had unlimited free time, I would do all these things, and it turns out
Yeah, you hear this a lot. Yeah.
you don't do any of them. You end up becoming just complacent, and that's the last thing you want to do. So take the time to figure yourself out, to study, to learn, and to grow, and that's kind of the whole point of this channel. Really, is to promote growth and change, and you know,
Listen to locals, listen to expats,
yeah, yeah,
compare stories. You'll find a lot of common threads,
100%,
at
100%.
least with the expats.
Yeah, you truly will. You truly will. The expats are all they're all in the same kind of journey. The ones that typically get out of the country, you'll find that they are in the same mental space that you were for a long time, and you're just at different phases of where where you are. Because I mean, a few years back, I would have said, "Oh yeah, I'll be here forever," but now I understand. Like, okay, this is a personal growth thing. So for sure, that actually
And I
sounds.
think that's what we want to talk about in subsequent episodes is once you've determined this and, you've taken a beat, you've taken a breath,
Hmm
you've relaxed some of maybe these symptoms of your traumas, like mine. I've told you, like I used to break out in sweats when I looked at a computer for a couple of years there.
hmm
After those things pass, and they don't pass on their own. It's through exposure, like anything else, right? Through exposure therapy. So start doing small things until it's not a problem. Get used to things again. Um, to have some type of plan or intention. Don't just float around. That is something, and I'll say that we know people this does happen, unfortunately.
Yep.
I wouldn't even call that escapism. I mean, it starts out as escapism, but I think it corrupts even further, and
hmm
um, people get a bit anxious, paranoid. They're almost frightened about going back to where they were from, and
Yeah.
that's not what you want to do, right? You need to take this time to look at the system, understand the system, look at your goals, who you are, what you want to do, and how to be, and how you can still grow in the direction you want to grow within finite systems.
Mm-hmm. That's well put. Very well put. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. I think it's a, it's it's a reality. I'm coming more and more into. I think you figured this out maybe last year. I'm starting to adjust to it, but definitely the self growth. And you do have time. I mean, like when you go to places, you can take the time that you need to, especially if you work online or something like that. It's much easier. But take the time to better yourself and not just get caught up in the escape. I think
Well, but to you're saying there you are. So don't just move your rut with you or change your rut. It's just a new rut.
right,
Okay, it's not the rut you used to be in, but it's a new rut. And maybe
right,
you get a new rut with every destination, but you're just repeating the same patterns.
right. So the little reprieve you get from learning a new system, learning a new culture, and learning a new country or city, that fades within a couple of months. So just keep that in mind if you do choose this path. But yeah, that seems like a good spot to end this episode on, man. We're about 25 minutes in. So anything you'd like to add besides like and subscribing down below?
Yeah,
For
you got that. So
yeah, we got it, and we'll see you on the next one.